the University of Arizona Bio5 Institute, we bring together hundreds of multifaceted experts that include world-class bioscientists, engineers, physicians, and computational researchers. This team science approach is designed to ignite creative solutions to the many complex biological challenges facing our families and communities, and has resulted in disease prevention strategies, promising new therapies, innovative diagnostics and devices, and improved food sustainability.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Science Talks, a conversation hosted by the Bio5 Institute at the University of Arizona. My name is Lisa Romero. I'm a resident of the sunniest state, Arizona, and we're no strangers to ample sunshine. And while sun exposure is beneficial to our well-being, it's also a major cause of skin cancer, the most common type of cancer in the US. At least 5 million people in our country are treated for skin cancer annually, and that's on the rise, and it results in more than $8 billion in medical expenses. Today, we're joined by physician scientist Dr. Clara Curiel-Lewandrowski, who is a professor of medicine and the Alan and Janice Levin Family Endowed Chair for Excellence in Cancer Research. She is the director of the Multidisciplinary Cutaneous Oncology Program at UArizona Skin Cancer Institute, where she's also the Institute co-director. She's also the interim chief of the Division of Dermatology, member of both the Bio5 Institute and UArizona Cancer Center, and program director for the Dermatology Residency Program. And I'm pretty sure I didn't hit all of the titles. And in her spare time, she is very, very accomplished as well. So we'll get to that in a minute. But Dr. Curiel, thank you for joining me today. It's really exciting to have you here.
Thank you, Lisa. It is always a pleasure to be with you and have the opportunity to talk about science.
Yeah. We've been, I've been trying to get you to come on here for a while. As you know, this is the first interview I've done with one of our scientists who is actually one of my personal physicians. So that's very exciting. I was just thinking about how long you've been my doctor, and I think it's been more than 20 years, which is really scary. I think this will lead us into this discussion about your research and your work on prevention and treatment and innovation approaches to solution-based, translational science. But I'm a great example. I'm a native of Arizona. I have light eyes and light skin. I have a huge family history of skin cancer. Every single member of my family has it. And I grew up in before, let's just say, I wanted to listen to my mother about wearing sunscreen, which was, just not done as much as it is today when I was growing up. And having said all that, I developed my first basal cell carcinomas at age 18. And I've had probably 200 since. And you know that well, but I wanted to talk a little bit about that and, your background, what got you into wanting to, be a part of the solution in that. I know you went to school in Venezuela. How did that sort of shape your career aspirations and where you are today?
Well, it is a long story, but we'll try to make it short so we can cover as much as we can during this interview. So so I have always been fascinated with science and especially with medicine. I'm coming from a family of physicians, and I did see my grandfather succumb to melanoma, metastatic melanoma. Light skin, blue eyes, growing up in the tropics, the Australian phenomena. And he did die despite being a physician of metastatic melanoma. So it is definitely something we understand very well what is happening, but the challenge is why can't we stop it from happening, right? So if we know that 99% of skin cancers are due to sun exposure, the association is equal or even stronger than tobacco and lung cancer. So it's a carcinogen. So what's going on here, right? Why are still so many people dying, today of a disease that is almost 100% preventable? And that's where, we come into place as scientists, physicians, is really to try to move the needle and make a difference on something that should have a solution that is tangible. And so I finished my medical school. I went straight into do research. I love science. And I decided to do dermatology and skin cancer work. So when we think about skin cancer and you ask yourself, where is it that the opportunity is to make a difference? And there are different stages on what we call skin carcinogenesis, from the beginning to the end of it. One is prevention, what is called primary prevention, meaning that we're capable of stopping the cancer from happening altogether. Secondary prevention is also known as early detection. So if we couldn't stop it from coming, let's find it early so we can, maximize the outcome of the intervention. And then you have then therapeutics, right? So you couldn't diagnose it early and it's more advanced, and then you develop treatment options that are more effective. So we here at the Arizona Cancer Center, at the Skin Cancer Institute, we work in every single aspect of this journey to be able to have an impact, and decrease the number of skin cancers and people dying from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, every time I talk to you and see you, there's so many cool things happening sort of on the second part of that spectrum that you just described. But maybe, maybe start with and go into a little bit more detail about prevention, because we say that word and we say it's 100% preventable, but you're dealing with human beings, and you're dealing with sort of a mentality of people that you may or may not be able to change. You're dealing with people in different parts of the world that have more or less challenges in that capacity. So how do you with your teams and the people you mentor, how do you start approaching that prevention part of this and make a difference in that area?
Great. So yes, when it comes to primary prevention, there are different strategies. One of them is the one that is typically known as a behavioral modification, which is let's do some avoidance or some protection, right? So is using your sunscreen, sun protected clothing, avoid peak time of sunshine, but we also know that it's ideal, but they're very difficult to achieve, because as humans we enjoy being out there, and as much as we want to live in harmony with the sun, sometimes it's not possible, and people get their sunburn and their long-term sun exposure. So this is one aspect of primary prevention that will continue to be enforced. And we do this at the Skin Cancer Institute with education early on. It's proven that the earliest you can intervene with this kind of education, the more effective you can be. However, there is another type of prevention that we also work quite extensively on, is known as therapeutic prevention. Therapeutic prevention means that if you couldn't really completely avoid some of the damage, can you reverse some of that damage or prevent from continuing to happen? So there are ways that we can identify in sun-damaged skin, sun that has been exposed to the sun for an extended period of time, and is in the process of developing a skin cancer. We're able to identify very specific cellular mechanisms, that are signatures that the cancer might occur, and we might be able to target it effectively by developing new drugs that again, it can reverse or prevent, that process. And this is where we have a fascinating and very exciting grant here at the Arizona Cancer Center, where we have identified 2 targets in the skin, within the skin cells, that we have. One is called TLR4, which is an immune-mediated molecule, and the other one is called TOPK, PRPK, which is highly related to cell proliferation and differentiation on your keratinocytes, which is one of the cells within your skin. And now, by the identification of these 2 targets, we have worked over the past 3 years on pushing forward new formulations of a drug that we know that can inhibit them. By doing this, we're able to then apply to some damaged skin or skin at risk, and being able to prevent particularly squamous cell carcinoma. So it is important to just review for 1 second, okay, what kind of skin cancer are you talking about? So yes, there are multiple types. And as you mentioned at the beginning of this talk, is the most, skin cancer is the most common type of cancer, all combined, all cancers combined, just have as many or more skin cancers. There's 2 main types of skin cancers, known as non-melanoma skin cancer and the melanoma skin cancer. So melanomas, people are probably the one that everyone is familiar with because it's the one with the highest mortality rate, but they also only account for about 3 to 4% of all cancers. The other 85%, 95% of skin cancers are driven by what we call non-melanoma skin cancers, mainly known as basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinomas. Basal cell carcinomas account for 80% of them, while squamous cell carcinoma is approximately another 30% of skin cancers. Basal cell carcinoma rarely metastasize, whereas squamous cell carcinomas do have a higher risk of metastasis. So our approach for therapeutic prevention, slowing down the progression of carcinogenesis, is mainly targeting squamous cell carcinoma, which is, again, the second most common type of skin cancer. And the reason why we have focused on this particular subtype is because squamous cell carcinomas do have a precancerous lesion known as actinic keratosis. And probably most Arizonans eventually will become familiar with that term. They call as AKs as well, or sun damaged spots. And they have a rate of transformation of approximately 1% per year. But when you have, typically people don't have just one AK, they have several. So when you start adding the risk, it can become significant. And this is why, having the opportunity to have a precancerous lesion that happens to develop in a sun-damaged skin, we're able to have different samples at different stages of carcinogenesis that allow us to study the journey of normal cell into sun-damaged cells into actinic keratosis type of cells into squamous cell carcinoma type of cells. And when you compare either the proteomics, the proteins produced by this skin, or the genes expressed, in a sequence of progression within the same individual, it really is a powerful opportunity to identify targets and develop solutions.
That is really, exciting and hope-filling for, again, a person that's really struggled with that. And when I first started getting them those, that innovation and that level of knowledge was not there. It could have, made a real difference in my journey, I think. So I'm, for me, again, having this be a very personal thing, it's, I'm highly invested in this work moving forward, and biology and heredity is equally concerning. I mean, again, we're in Arizona. Does this run in families? Does it, is it genetic, and combined with the sun make it different? Are those things that all come into play as you're doing your analysis as well?
Correct. No, definitely your family risk factor, and part of your genetics is your skin type too, right? So inevitably, yes, is a component of genetics. But what I do try to tell our patients consistently is you can really win this battle. You can really win the battle because we have better treatments today. We can intervene earlier. We have different modalities that didn't exist before. So if you are consistent and you go to your dermatologist, you keep telling them, I want to be ahead of the game here. How can I revert this process? You don't have to be one of those individuals that come in with an advanced tumor and regretting the fact that you didn't do something about it early on. It is totally doable, but it does require that mindset of I'm gonna take care of these. I'm gonna be ahead. Some of these treatments are not easy, for prevention. They can cause a lot of inflammation. They are irritating. They can have other systemic side effects that, probably no one wants to experience, but for the most part are not life-threatening in any way. So it just requires, time, dedication, and having that relationship with your dermatologist or other providers, to be able to tackle it early on.
This is definitely off script and scientific in a completely different way, but I think, you know, the audience that's listening to this, do you have any great tips for the type of sunscreen if you're wanting to protect and you know, with sunscreen, with a hat, with sort of sun you know, related clothing? Are those all good ideas, you know, as they again layer on top of one another? And do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, definitely. So starting with sunscreen, just remember there's two different types of sun protection. There is sunscreen and sunblock. So they're not necessarily the same. Sunscreen contains chemicals that are able to quench the effect of UV radiation into your skin. So any of those radical oxygens and so forth that are generated from UV exposure in your skin, then the sunscreen can basically absorb that. The other one is physical blocks or sunblocks. What they do, they create a layer on top of your skin that prevent altogether those sun rays penetrating into your skin. And the two most typical types are titanium dioxide and zinc oxide. It used to be that no one wanted to use them because they're thick, you know, pleasant to use, not very friendly. But now they are micronized and they're very easy to apply on different formulations. So if you really want to be thorough and protect as much as possible, go after your physical blocks. Then of course, clothing, we always say that's the easiest, you know, and now again, we have moved along. I mean, it used to be this ugly looking, you know, type of, you know, SPF clothing, but now it's even fashionable, you know, which is great. That really moves forward and enhancing the adoption of this approach, which is highly, highly effective between sun protected clothing and your hat, which, you know, is a must if you live in Arizona. That combination, you know, is whatever is not protected with your clothing, put your sunblock on and you should be good. And remember to reapply. You know, that's sunblock or sunscreen do not last the whole day. Every 2-3 hours is a good idea to put it back on. So all of these, I mean, it can really keep you living in harmony with the sun. You know, that's why we're here and that's why we enjoy, you know, being in Arizona. So yeah, so these are all approaches, you know, if you continue to protect, if you can get ahead, you have options of stopping the process. And if you can't stop the process and you get to the point where, you know, they are ruling out a skin cancer in you, this is where the technology has also moved forward. Now we really have fascinating tools for early diagnosis. And I think it's important for the patients to know about this and the public to know about this. Typically, when you have a suspicious lesion, the first, you know, step is to do a skin biopsy because our gold standard is to look at the skin under the microscope. But the good news is that the microscope can also look at your skin without doing a biopsy. For the past, I would say almost 20 years plus, there is a technique known as in vivo confocal microscopy, just in vivo, just as it stands, you know, live microscopy, where you're able to put a microscope on top of your skin and being able to visualize those cells without, you know, going through a surgical procedure. That started probably, as I said, 20 years back at Wellman Lab in Boston. And we're very lucky that we recruited here at Bio5 and the College of Optical Sciences, Dr. Kang, I want to say about 6 years ago now, going to 7 years, whose work is really to make in vivo confocal microscopy accessible to a larger group of individuals. One of the challenges with this live microscope is that it's bulky, expensive, and not easy to be, again, adopted for these reasons into clinical practice. But what Dr. Kang would call him DK, what DK has been able to do is miniaturize this equipment to the size of a laptop and the handheld piece, which you can easily place it on the skin and visualize, you know, any kind of skin lesions up to about 300 microns, which is a reasonable depth, you know, to see most type of skin cancers. So for the past 5-6 years, we have been working together, and this is where it's one of those wonderful opportunities, you know, working at a university where team science really happens. You know, as I described on the previous project on therapeutic prevention, is basic scientists with pharmacists, pharmacologists, drug development, biomarker discovery, together with physicians working to find that solution. In this example, we have engineers, bioengineers, working with clinicians, really trying to fill this particular gap, in our care. And, we are currently using the instrument, trying to move that needle forward and trying to commercialize it more effectively. So more and more dermatology practices across the country can implement this technology.
Yeah, that's one of the, I think, constant things we've been talking about in these podcasts that's been really it's really a great example of what you described. We talk about collaboration all the time, but the way that we've been able to talk about it in these episodes, is just like you described. I mean, it's an actual merging of two completely different points of view, completely different experiences and expertise, and going, oh, wow, we can really do something here. And, that really immediately starts making an impact and making a change in human health. And, that's so much of what Bio5 is about and what I'm lucky enough to be able to hear all the time. But I think it's really exciting to be able to share that with our listeners as well. And that, it's not just about working together just to work together. It's about working together to create, to create innovation that really is going to move the needle for the people of Arizona, for the people of the world. And that's a exciting outcome that I, look forward to hearing more about. So I want to just switch gears a little bit. I know something that known you for a long time and seen a lot of residents come in and out of your program, and really watched you as a mentor. And you're the head of the residency program, and I know how important that is to you. I know a lot of physicians say it's important, but they don't necessarily really put in the time and really have it come from their heart. And you do, because I've seen it firsthand. Just talk a little bit about that and why sort of the investment in that, in that mentorship, in that training. They work side by side with you. I mean, I've watched dozens of them over the years work side by side and learn from you, and you talk with them and they learn, they learn from your own experience. How meaningful is that to you, and sort of how do you just incorporate that into all of the other things you're taking on?
That is a good question. It's a question that you don't reflect on very often. You're doing it, but verbalizing it is very different. Mm-hmm. And I think the best way to put it is what is the meaning of anything you're doing if it's not passed on to someone who can do it better than you do? Mm-hmm. Because that's the real concept of evolving and transforming, right? Because it's not static. For me as a physician scientist, there is only so much I can accomplish by myself. But the real success is when you have a team of people that share a vision, they understand the needs and the gaps, they want to be part of the process, and they all contribute in their own way with their strengths, all along. I like to focus on people's strengths, not necessarily on weaknesses. If we spend the time correcting people's weaknesses, we'll never get forward. But the strengths, is what fascinates me the most. And they're so easy to identify eventually when you work with them, and that is a real driver, So I think just being in a university where we're surrounded by opportunities, you have the patients in front of you with a problem and a need, and then you reflect on, okay, sometimes it works perfect, and what we have is just, okay, there's no need to do anything else there. But in so many instances, there is something we could be doing better. So the opportunity to train somebody to get very quickly up to speed onto what is available now and the way of thinking and decision making, but also plant that seed of, there is this that we haven't been able to do today, and then support them to be able to then go ahead and close that gap on on their own or with their own team. So I think that's part of the process, and eventually becomes second nature. It's like we're not thinking about it anymore. It's just the way how we function, how we operate. And I think that's probably part of the magic in all of this.
I hear you say all the time, what do you think? You know, when you have somebody beside you that is learning, you always say that first. You don't say I think, or you know, this is, or but you say what do you think? And you know, again, that that may seem routine to you, but I can tell you that is not routine for every physician or researcher or both. And so, you know, I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for people like you that really do, you know, you're not only excellent at what you do, and you pursue that, of course, because it, you know, being good at what you do makes a difference for other people, but you also, you know, without really regard for yourself, ask people to come alongside you and teach them. So we're really grateful for that. And in fact, you have graciously even mentored some of our high school students. We have our Keys program that, you know, students from across Arizona get to come and work with people like you and learn, and you know, at a stage in which not a lot of people, you know, in the country get to do that. And I know, you know, that they've really learned from you, and you've actually even become a Keys mom with some of your own. It's a little bit different being a Keys mentor and a Keys mom, I think, but you know, we're really grateful for your dedication to that program as well.
No, thank you for the opportunity. I mean, it's a 360 approach here, right? So
Yeah, and you know, starting them early keeps them here. We get to keep a lot of these great students who end up being, you know, in programs down the road, you know, at the university and at Banner, and so it's a win-win for all of us.
I agree. And they're kids in, I mean, I have mentor kids since high school that knew exactly what they wanted to do, which is really interesting. And there are those that do not, but I think you have to expose them. You have to give them the opportunity to see what is available out there. And then just being part of that process, you know, of finding your way, what really, you know, gives you those strokes, because, you know, eventually that's going to do for the rest of your life. And hopefully, you know, but recognize that early on. And if you can, you know, and if not, eventually, at least at some point, you know, it's important they find what really matters to them. It's priceless.
Yeah, for sure. And we get to see it firsthand. It's very cool. Another thing we tapped you to do is be part of our, you know, Bio 5 Inspiring Women in STEM events in the past. And, you know, we're, again, at Bio 5, sort of this diversity of background, of thought, of, you know, knowledge and expertise. You know, being a woman in STEM, do you have any sort of, you know, just words of quick wisdom for any young girls that are hoping to pursue a career in science and medicine, which, by the way, either or is difficult, but both is extremely difficult, extremely rewarding, as we've talked to a lot of physician scientists, but very difficult. Just a, you know, kind of a word of inspiration on you know, what to think about now as they're at that stage.
Yeah, you know, I think time has changed, you know, significantly. You know, probably my answer now is not the same that it would have been 10 years ago. I really find that girls these days rarely feel that there is a barrier for them to really achieve what they want to achieve in life, which is wonderful to see. But we are in a very unique position in this country to do that. It doesn't happen everywhere. And, you know, hopefully we'll get there one day. But right now, I think irrespective of anything, clarity and resilience, you know, are very important. You know, if you are clear and understand your path, you know, stick with it. If that's what you want to achieve. And if you don't find the right support here or there, keep seeking it, because it's out there. Just having had the opportunity to find it, but don't give up. You know, the resilient aspect, if you want to go into medical school, you're into science, and it took you another year or 2 years or 3 years, it's okay. There is something along that way that you're supposed to learn too. So don't think it's wasted time. It's not. It took me longer than other people to get eventually into dermatology here, which is very competitive in the US, as you know. And but I had to do more research, which for me was not a penalty. It's actually something that I'm very grateful that I ever did. Most of my immunology background came from those years that I invested on to get to where I am today. And the fascinating part is that now I probably know more about it and can relate more in a team science group than I would have if I didn't have that toll that I needed to pay 20 years ago. So don't necessarily question the hardship. Embrace the hardship, because it is part of the process and it's going to get you ahead eventually. You just don't know yet what it's going to mean to you. So stick with it, be resilient, be clear, keep going after that goal, and you will get there.
It's amazing how much has changed in the world, as you described, but that the phrase "don't give up" is still really at the heart of everything. And you don't always know why until much later, but just keep going. And it's really kind of amazing that those words are still what drives us. And you're absolutely right. Well, I could talk to you forever, and but I just want to say thank you for all you do for your patients, for research, as a physician researcher, and looking at creating solutions that really do make a difference for people. So I get the privilege of watching you firsthand do that, but for all of us, I really want to say, how much I look up to you and appreciate all that you do.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. And I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to be here, of all the work you do at Bio5. You are all an inspiration and an incredible venue for people to achieve what they're meant to do.
Thank you so much. And thank you again for joining us today. Thanks to our listeners for joining us on another episode of Science Talks. For more information, please visit our website at bio5.org. And from all of us at the Bio5 Institute, we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks to our listeners for tuning in to another episode of Science Talks. Continue the conversation with us next time as we learn more about the amazing science happening at the University of Arizona's Bio5 Institute.